Welcome to the Moms of Tweens and Teens podcast. If some days you doubt yourself and you don't know what you're doing, if you've ugly cried alone in your bedroom because you felt like you're failing, well, I just want you to know you're not alone and you have come to the right place. Raising tweens and teens in today's world is not easy, and I'm on a mission to equip you to love well and to raise emotionally healthy, happy tweens and teens that thrive. I believe that moms are heroes, and we have the power to transform our family and to impact future generations. If you are looking for answers, encouragement, and to become more of the mom and the woman that you want to be, welcome. I'm Cheryl Gould, and I am so glad that you're here. Hi, friend. Welcome to the show today, and I'm so glad that you're here and you're spending time with me in the midst of this busy season. And next week, I'm going to be talking about how to really cultivate connection and be intentional about this time of the year and how to stress less and really focus on what really matters to us. So I hope that you will tune in for that. It's just going to be me and you. And also, I am very excited about you listening to this episode today because I am with the incredible Dayna Abraham. And if you don't know Dayna, she is a trusted and proven leader in the parenting community. She's an award-winning, national board certified educator who has spent over 10 years in the classroom. She is also the founder of the popular parenting site Lemon Lime Adventures, and she is the CEO of Calm the Chaos, which is a 7-figure company which offers support to thousands of parents worldwide. Her social media has a weekly reach of over 1.2 million. And today we discuss Dayna's recent book, Calm the Chaos. We talk about parenting a challenging kid and what that is like. And Dayna shares the importance of how we can shift our perspective of how we view our challenging kids and their challenging behaviors. And she also shares some great nuggets from her book that we can use to help ground us in the heat of those challenging moments and be able to find calm in the midst of the chaos. So let's dive in. Well, welcome, Dayna, to the Moms of Tweens and Teens podcast. I am so excited to have you here.
I am so excited to be here. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. Well, what you are doing and your book, Calm the Chaos, I've been reading it. It's super helpful. What you do is so needed. And I just want to launch in and have you share with our listeners how you got started doing what you're doing and telling a little bit of your story.
Yeah. So I sometimes joke that I was born into this because I grew up as a sibling of a bipolar brother. And so I was on the receiving end of a lot of his explosions. And I watched my parents, despite being, I think, really amazing parents, I saw them struggle raising him, and I saw him struggle to figure out, the best ways to navigate life. And then when I grew up, I became an educator, and my favorite kids were the ones that came with paper trail behind them, or the other teachers would talk about them in the staff lounge. And these kids were the ones that were getting in trouble a lot, or they weren't showing up to school. And there was all these things under the surface, and I knew there was so much more to them. So when I became a parent, I was like, I got this figured out. Like, I grew up with it. I've had the worst, I've dealt with it in the classroom. I'm going to be able to handle anything my kid throws at me. And boy, was I wrong. So my oldest, by the time he hit school, he was kicked out of his first preschool. I was getting calls from school in kindergarten. By first grade, he was getting suspended. By second grade, he was suspended more days than he was in school. And it just kept escalating. And so it just became really evident that he was on a very similar trajectory that my brother was on. And I just did not want to see that happen. And so I ended up quitting teaching, coming home, homeschooling him against my will. And like my main goal really was not academic. It was, how do I help him not hate himself for not being like all the other kids? And how do I help him not hate the world for it not really being a world that he fits in? And so I didn't want him to blame others, and I didn't want him to blame himself. So we really kind of hunkered down, and I went back into all of the things I had studied in school and all the new research that was out, and just piece by piece started trying to figure out how to help him and help our family.
Wow. I've never heard anybody ever explain it that way. And I feel so emotional because rather than stopping his behavior, I just want him to stop this behavior, which of course, when you have a kid that's acting out that way, you do want to stop it, but that you did not want him to hate himself and hate others. And
because I knew at the root of it what would happen. And we see this, especially as they get older and they turn into teenagers, they turn that hate towards themselves and they start hurting themselves. And, or they turn that hate towards others. And that's where we see this like large, increase of dangerous things happening in schools. And, and then if it doesn't happen when they're teenagers, once they become adults and they still have that anger towards everyone else, that's where we see all of this other stuff that's happening in the news now. And it's just like, let's stop it before it gets to that point where they don't love themselves and they don't love other people. Like I knew that was at the core of what he needed.
yeah. How was that when you were like scared you're going to that place of, oh my gosh, he might struggle with what my brother has?
Yeah. I mean, it was hard. I talk a lot about in my programs, I think our thoughts play a huge role in how we show up and respond to our kids. And so if I allowed myself to see my son's behavior as attacks, as violence, as abuse, then I reacted and responded as if it was abuse. And so I had to really change my language and thoughts around what it was, their struggles. If he could respond differently, he would. If he could calm himself down, he would. My son is not innately bad, and children who act this way aren't innately bad. They are struggling and they don't know how to get the help they need, and they don't know how to even communicate what is going on the inside. And many of them don't know what's going on because of their age. They don't have that metacognition, or they don't have that self-awareness yet. And so they need at least one person who's going to be there to support them, to help them understand themselves, and to empower them and not give up on them. And I saw that that's one of the things that my brother really lacked, is having someone who could help him understand himself instead of let's fix you. Let's get you better. Let's make you fit into the world, instead of here's all this awesomeness about you. And here's the flip side of like how that's showing up in the world that's making it hard for you to navigate the world.
A very different mind shift. And taking off these glasses that you see things through and putting on a whole different set to see it through a different lens.
Yeah. And it's hard, and you have to remind yourself, and I'm not perfect, right? I always tell my community when you fall back into these things, I don't like to call them mistakes. I don't like to say I did it wrong. Instead, I like just kiss my brain. Thanks, brain, for reminding me I'm human. Like, this is a very human experience. So I'm not going to get it perfect. I am going to get triggered by things my son is doing or by the things kids are doing. I might go into those catastrophizing thoughts of like, oh my gosh, is my son going to be the next school shooter? Like, like that did happen. That crossed my mind many times. It scared me. And so I always took everything seriously. I don't want anyone to hear that like I just passed it off as like, oh, he's being a kid, he's doing his thing. It was like, no, this is super serious. But I know at the root, it's about helping me understand who he is and him understanding himself, so we can figure out tools and systems that actually work.
And so how did you come about writing Calm the Chaos?
So Calm the Chaos is, I like to think of it as like a decade in the making. So I brought my son home 10 years ago, almost to the day of like right now, as we're recording this. And so it took a long time to navigate and figure out. And I created a community because I felt so alone and I didn't consider myself an expert. I didn't feel like I knew what I was doing at all because here I am. I have all this educational background and I couldn't help my own son. So I started a community just so I wouldn't feel so alone. And I wanted to find one other person. And over, the last 10 years, I've found millions of other parents who are struggling and feel so isolated and feel like no one understands what they're going through. And they've placed so much blame on themselves. Like, maybe I did this, maybe it's my fault, maybe I ruined my kid. And they're trying to figure out what's going on. And so about 5 years ago, I said, all right, I think we've started finding some things that are working. Let me go ahead and put this together and I'll make a little course. And so I put together a course. We had 25 people do it, then 50, then 75, then 200, then thousands. And so as people came in and did the course, I started to see that this doesn't just work for aggressive behavior, but it works for, toddlers who are having tantrums over, you gave them a purple shoe instead of a blue shoe, or, you sliced their apple the wrong way. And it also worked for teenagers who are starting to experiment with drugs, or they're finding inappropriate things online and they're having conversations and relationships that aren't really safe for them. So it works in all those different instances. And at the beginning, it was this framework that I talk about in the book. It was these 4 key ingredients that are, because what I wanted to create, I'm kind of going all over the place, so forgive me, but what I wanted to create is I didn't want to just create another do this, say this is the right way, this is the wrong way. I didn't want to create another resource like that. I wanted something that could be adaptable to each unique family and to each unique child, because there is no cookie cutter solution. And you hear people say all the time, there's no handbook for raising challenging kids. Or there's no handbook once kids are out of, there's what to expect when you're expecting, but there's no, kids don't come with a manual. And I was like, but what if they did? Like, what if there was like at least a framework to guide us that, you could kind of say, okay, I'm dealing with this challenge. What do I do? How do I approach this? And what I realized is there's these 4 key ingredients really with any challenge. And it comes down to connection, understanding, empowerment, and then you, the one person, being grounded, centered, and showing up in the best way you can for that other person. And so that's that mindset piece I was talking about. And you need all 4. You don't need to have them mastered. You don't need to be perfect at all of them, but you do need all of them. So that's why you'll hear people say, well, I've tried building connection with my 13-year-old and they ignore me, or they don't want to connect with me. And so nothing works. And it's like, well, that's the connection part. You also have to have the understanding. What's under the surface? Why aren't they wanting to connect? Or maybe they have a different way of connecting and you're not connecting in their way. Or maybe you have the mindset that 13-year-olds are just supposed to be bratty and snotty and rude. And so when you approach it that way, they're already getting that energy from you. And they're already like, oh yeah, mom thinks I'm annoying. Right. And even though you love them, and then maybe you don't have the empowerment piece down where the kids don't feel like their voice matters and they don't feel like they have a say in what they do and how they get to navigate. Because that's one of the things that a lot of 13-year-olds feel like is like, my mom doesn't listen to me, or my dad doesn't listen to me, or, like you're not listening to what I'm trying to tell you. And so that empowerment piece is really important, both for the parent and the kid. So you need all 4 ingredients. So that's where that came from. And then then COVID happened. And one of the things that we noticed is you can have the best framework, you can have the best strategies, the best tools, but if you're in survival mode, you can't access them. And that's where the roadmap was born, is that a lot of the resources and tools out there start with create structure, create rules, create boundaries, create routines. And those are all great. You need all those things. But if you're in survival mode, if your house is dealing with arguments from the moment feet hit the floor till the moment that you go to bed, you can't access all of those great tools and strategies that you're trying to implement, and neither can your kids. And so with the roadmap, and the book lays it out, there's 5 stages. And at each stage, it uses those 4 key ingredients, and it starts really, really simple and small, and then it builds as it goes. And in those first few stages, it's all about you, not about the kids, because you can't control other people. And so what you can control is yourself. When chaos is happening all around you, you can say, okay, I need to be grounded. I need to be calm in the storm. I can control how I show up. I can get my own time and energy back. Now I can build that relationship with my kids. And so now I'm ready for structure and routines and things like that.
I love that so much. Everything that I was reading your book, I was like, yes, yes, yes. It's so spot on, because you, like you said, you can have all these tools, but if you're not grounded,
it doesn't
then
matter.
it all goes out. It doesn't matter, and then you feel like you're failing. Like, one more thing, I'm blowing it. And so all those components are super helpful. And I love how you put that, they all go together.
They do. And it feels super overwhelming if you try to do everything and all the advice out there. And then there's conflicting advice. And, as an ADHD adult, I have like a unique perspective of when a project is really overwhelming, when something feels far too large to tackle, the way that you move forward through it is by finding one tiny baby step. But a lot of parenting advice out there isn't tiny baby steps. It's, you're starting at the end result. Let's create this tool. Let's teach our kids growth mindset. Let's teach our kids self-regulation strategies. And it's like, nope, let's get everyone feeling safe, heard, seen, and valued first. Then we can teach them those other things.
And then a lot of those issues go away when they feel that.
Yes. When they feel safe, when they feel seen and heard, and when they feel, then you can start building those tools and plans and resources as you go, and the relationships start changing. They start advocating for their own needs. And I know my son's 18, but he's autistic, has ADHD, sensory processing disorder. He was misdiagnosed as DMDD, which is dysregulated mood disorder, when he was growing up. And he's got massive anxieties. We went trick-or-treating the other day. He wanted to take his actual real sword instead of a play sword because it went with his costume. And I was like, I just don't feel like that's very safe. And he goes, well, how about this? How about we have a conversation about it? Instead of getting frustrated, he was like, I think we should have a conversation and talk about our concerns. So can you share your concerns? And then I tell him what my concerns are. He tells me his, and we end up coming up with a plan that we'll get the sword out, we'll take pictures, and then we'll put it away because it's going to be safer if the sword stays home since it's real, not a toy. And after that, he was totally fine. But that is what's possible when you start small and you start building this, where if I had just said, no, you're not taking the sword, that's the end of the story. We're done. He's 18. He could be like, I'm doing whatever I want, Mom. You can't stop me. But instead he was like, well, let's have a conversation about this. I was like, okay, let's have a conversation.
I love that because you've modeled. That's what you teach. And when you see, and I want all the listeners to know that when we model it, they do catch it.
Absolutely.
And sometimes we think, no, I just want to stop this behavior in my kid. I want to fix it. But it's like Dan Siegel says, inside out parenting. He has that. Yes. And that's like what it is. And then here he's like, can we have a conversation? You were actually, you were able to hear him calmly and talk and came up with something, and he felt heard. And like you were listening.
And it takes longer to solve the problem when you're doing it, but the change lasts longer. That's what I think is so important. So instead of just being like, I'm going to fix the behavior, I'm going to take away their electronics, I'm going to, nip this in the bud, I'm going to, punish them or ground them or give them a timeout, whatever it is. I mean, when you're dealing with older kids, you're probably not giving them a timeout. Instead, you're grounding them or you're taking away their phone or whatever that is. But when you hand them that phone back, guess what? You didn't actually solve the problem. You didn't teach them a skill. They didn't learn a new strategy. And so they're going to go right back to whatever it was because we didn't solve the root cause of whatever was causing the thing to make you take that thing away. And so while the behavior might stop faster if you take things away or if you enforce a really strict boundary and say, I'm the parent, this is the way it's going to be, it might go away at first, but you're not creating lifelong change. Whereas if you take that extra, maybe, a month to work through one particular struggle, or sometimes we see in our community, people will focus on one struggle for 90 days. And by the end of the 90 days, if they stay focused on just that one struggle, it's usually solved. And not only is it solved, it has ripple effects into so many other struggles because there's skills that are built and there's tools that are created and systems that are created. And there's a relationship and trust, a foundation that's really built that goes for the next time something comes up, they're able to communicate that.
Yeah. And I love that because especially how you mentioned having tweens and teens is they will resist. Like they can say, if you're not hearing them, if you're just saying no, they can go, no, I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah, and you can't move them.
You can't
they're not 3.
Yeah,
you can't pick them up and carry them to their room.
Yeah, you can't make them. And that's so frustrating. And so, and just, I love that. Being able to have those conversations are so important and to empower them. So I want you to share the anchors, because when I was reading the book, I thought, ooh, these are so good. So can you?
So anchors are super powerful. The idea of an anchor is, there's a lot of affirmations. There's a lot of sayings out there, and they're usually a poster of like 15 of them, and we all save them on our phones and little memes and things like that. But when it comes time to actually, when our kid doesn't get off electronics, when we get the report card home and they haven't been turning in their work, we start to fly off the handle and we can't access our own tools in the moment. And so an anchor is something that grounds you in the heat of the moment, and you've practiced it a ton out of the moment so that it can ground you. And you're coming up with something that's unique to you that your brain believes. So as adults, we still go into our own stress response and that fight, flight, or freeze response. And so we might yell, we might shut down, we might hide away in the closet, whatever it is. Or we might even just appease like whatever's going on and be like, fine, just do it. Because it's easier than having that fight. And so if we know that's how we show up, when we can create an anchor for those rough moments, we can ride the storm without falling into those instinctual habits, and we can actually rewire how we show up in stressful moments. And so some examples of this would be what I describe in the book. One of them is a memory anchor. And so when we see our kid and they are saying, I hate you, you're the worst mom ever, shut up, mom, whatever those are, or they're calling us bruh, then we have
a t-shirt we sell on the website.
So if they're mommy, I love that shirt.
Mom, bra. Yeah.
I love that shirt. Yeah. So if any of those things are happening and we're like, how dare you, right? Like the thing comes up in our head. But if we can then see them as that 1-year-old or that 6-month-old that needed us, that was dependent on us, that is crying because they don't have words, if we can picture that in that moment, sometimes that's super grounding for us to remember, wait a second, they're still developing, they're still growing, they're still a child and they need me. And so me reacting to them, I would not yell at my 6-month-old for yelling at me because they're tired, hungry, upset, whatever it is. I would try to help them and support them. And it's harder when you're looking at a teenager, but that anchor can be really helpful. when you remember them and picture them as a little baby. The other thing, sometimes that's not helpful for people, a memory anchor. So they use things that are scents, certain smells, or certain body movements, or certain thoughts. Like a lot of times our people will use now is not the time as an anchor, something that just really grounds them. So they want to be like, no, we're not going to do that. You cannot say that to me. And instead, they just tell themselves in their head, now is not the time. Because what that means is now is not the time to fix this. Now is not the time to enforce. Now is not like, let's get through this. Then we can talk about, you were really upset earlier and you said some things that were really hurtful. But in the moment, they're not going to hear you say that anyway.
Yeah.
And so it's, if you can find one phrase that your brain believes that reminds you that you're safe. Another one that my students love is there is no bear. And what that means is, right, like our brain is going into this like, oh my gosh, there's a bear. I either need to fight it or run or hide from it. And so if you say there is no bear, we're okay, we can get through this, you're telling your brain, it's okay. Thanks, friend, but I got this. Like, I do not need you to go into that stress response, but you practice it out of the moment. So I tell people, you're going to laugh at this, but I say practice while you pee. So when you're going to the bathroom, you picture your teenager talking back to you. When you are washing the dishes or washing your hands, you imagine your kid rolling their eyes at you. Whatever it is, the thing that typically triggers you and you struggle to remain calm in, you're going to picture that. And then you're going to picture yourself stopping, not saying anything, taking a big deep breath in so that your brain gets oxygen, and then saying that phrase in your head, either picturing them as a baby or saying there is no bear or now is not the time or he needs me. You practice that so many times out of the moment, you're going to notice that when it actually happens, it becomes instinctual. You have literally rewired your brain.
Yeah. Yeah. And research shows that. I just want to say a couple of them that I think are really helpful because I wrote them down. All behavior is communication. Mm-hmm. They aren't doing this to me. That's really good with teenagers. And this isn't about me. And I think those are really good too, when especially when you've got those tweens and teens, like, okay, this isn't personal. This isn't about me.
And another one for teens and tweens that's really important that I find is we can catastrophize and we can see them as 18 or 24-year-olds. And so if we just say like, this isn't one of my friends says, or one of our students says, this isn't an emergency. Because we think, oh my gosh, if they're doing this at 10, if they're doing this at 12, if they're doing this at 13, what's going to happen when? And it's like, I can only worry about now. I can't worry about 10 years down the road or 5 years down the road. And that stress gets stronger the closer they get to 18. We put so much pressure on ourselves because we start feeling like we're running out of time. And if we can tell ourselves we're not running out of time. This isn't an emergency. I'm not running out of time. This is just a moment. That can help calm us too.
Oh, so good, Dayna. Well, tell them all about where to find you, where to get your book, which is fabulous. All that you're doing. You have so much support, so many resources. I want them to check out what's available to them. So,
well, thank you. Yeah. So you can get the book anywhere books are sold. And then after you do that, you can go to calmthechaosbook.com. And we have some fun goodies for you and bonuses for you when you put in your receipt over there. You can also find me. I have my own podcast, and then I'm on every social channel at Calm the Chaos Parenting. And we offer several different courses and memberships to support you and meet you where you're at. And so the best thing is, just reach out on one of those social channels. Let me know that you heard me on this podcast, and we'll figure out what's going to be the best suited program for you.
Wonderful. Well, Dayna, thank you. And I just look forward to, I know we're going to be in contact and talking more. And so I'm just really excited about that and so grateful for what you're doing and what you offer to parents.
Well, thank you. I am so excited about us collaborating more and all the good things that you're doing as well. So thank you.
Well, that's it for today. And thank you so much for joining me. And if you know a mom that could benefit from what was shared today, that has perhaps a challenging kid and they just need to know they're not alone, if you could take a moment and share this episode with them. We need to know that there's support and there's a community and there's others that are experiencing similar challenges. It's so helpful. And I also would ask that if you're enjoying this podcast, if you would leave a review, just take some moment and share what you appreciate about the podcast. It helps to spread the love and for other moms and caregivers to know that we are here and there's a community and a website and all kinds of helpful resources. So next week, I'm going to be back here and I am going to be sharing about how to make the holiday time meaningful with your family, how to stay sane. I'm going to be helping you to walk through some reflective questions, and it's going to be a great time. And it's just going to be you and me, and I'm really looking forward to it. So hopefully you'll be able to join me next week in the midst of the busyness. And until then, have a wonderful week.